Danielle Smith for Common Sense Calgary. We are interviewing all of the candidates for the Calgary civic election this fall. And joining me now is your candidate for Ward 12, Phan. Stephen, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Danielle. Thanks for having me this morning.
My pleasure. So let's talk about what your priorities are. Why did you decide to throw your name into this race?
Oh, Danielle, it's a long story, and I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version of it. So my family immigrated here from Vietnam after the Vietnam War. My dad and his brother, they started a family business here in Calgary, fixing appliances and electronics. And my dad often has came to Canada with this hope, opportunity, and freedom mindset. And right now I think is the best time for opportunity in Calgary to make this city better than what it is, and to pave the path for future generations, for my kids and their kids.
All right. Well, tell me what you're hearing in your ward, Ward 12, as the top issues. I see that you got a survey online. Have you got some responses back yet?
Oh yeah, the responses have been overwhelming, I want to say. The top concerns, I did ask some. I have to disclose this part of it. I know some people have said that healthcare doesn't fall under municipal jurisdiction, and yes, I understand that, but I still want to figure out, what are Calgarians' top concerns, and some of it is healthcare and education. But I would say municipally, the top concerns would be our budget spending. Green line in this area for Ward 12 is a big one that I'm seeing on the surveys as well. Accountability, transparency is another top concern for Calgarians, or at least in Ward 12 here.
Okay, so Shane Keating has been the council member there. He chose not to run again, but he was a very staunch advocate on the issue of the Green Line. Do you think do you think that was the right priority for him? Do you think he took the right position?
I believe so, especially if you look at cities around the world. I think transit is definitely one of the things that makes a city a world-class city, and I think that's something that we're trying to shoot for here in Calgary, especially in this area when we have a lot of young families. And in speaking with a lot of the young families, their concern is when their kids grow up, graduate from high school, and go on to post-secondary, which can be very expensive. How are they gonna get there, and what sort of affordable method of transportation is going to help their children get there? And definitely having that Green Line, it would be very, very vital to this area.
I think with the Green Line, it started off as a great project with lots of consensus, three-party buy-in at all three levels of government, because it was going to stretch from the deep south to the deep north. It was going to be $4.5 billion, and now it's $20 billion. It is going to, 20 kilometers, $5.5 billion, and it doesn't connect in with the existing LRT system. So do you have a proposal for how you might fix it?
Oh, yeah, I think that's the risk that the provincial government is concerned about. And I'm not sure what the details are around it, why it's not integrating with our existing transit system. And I mean, this transit hasn't, this isn't anything that's new, right? Like it's you look at cities like Chicago or New York, which have a transit system, or even in North America, and somehow they've been able to integrate their network and new networks with their existing network. And I don't understand completely why we can't make that possible.
All right, let me just go back to Councillor Keating's record for just a minute. Anything that he did that you would have done differently if you'd been there the last 4 years?
In terms of the Green Line and advocating
No, just
for
the decisions that he made to broaden it out beyond the Green Line.
I think he's done a good job of bringing the Green Line to fruition, I guess you could say. And I think where he could have maybe advocated for more is getting it down to where I'm at in Seaton. I bought a house 10 years ago in Auburn Bay, and that's something that was promised to me by the developer and the home builders, and that was one of the key factors into why I bought there, is that transportation. And then now I've moved further south into Seton here, and that's another big promise, a big selling feature that they're pushing to everybody, the homeowners that are purchasing homes here, that there's this future green line that's going to come in. And I think Councillor Keating has done everything that he can to try to bring it down here. The cost, though, is what gets me. I just don't understand why it's costing so much.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I guess
let me put it to you, because one of the other proposals put forward is to not build all of that excessive amount of infrastructure downtown and just build the South Line to
yes.
connect with, say, Stampede Park, and then you could build it out further. I mean, is that the kind of thing you'd advocate for, or what, or do you have an alternative?
Yeah, that's what I would want to advocate for, is like, why can't we just build just the part of it for now and integrate it to like Stampede Park or an existing line, and then figure out the rest later on.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more. We'll talk more about capital spending in just a minute, but you'd mentioned
Sure.
that the budget is an issue. What exactly are you hearing? Are people upset with the level of spending? Are they upset with taxes, or is it a little bit of both?
I would say it's a little bit of both. High taxes. A lot of Calgarians feel that the double-digit increase, the COVID tax is what people are calling it,
Hmm.
was very unfair, and that it hurts. It's hurting families. That's what I'm hearing at the doors. And the spending, the city has been on the spending spree, is what a lot of folks are saying at the doors.
Let's talk a little bit more about taxes, because I
Yeah.
understand with this tax shift going on that homeowners got a bit of a sticker shock, but businesses have had a sticker shock for years. Part of the problem
Mhm.
was the hollowing out of the downtown business base, and so it got loaded up on small businesses. I've heard that some of them saw 300% increases in recent years. So how would you approach that mix? How would you address the issue for the residents that you're hearing from, but also make sure that it's not business who's taking on an unfair burden?
Yeah, finding a key balance is key to everything. I think the first thing that I would do is when um, we're all elected, is I would propose that we do a spending review on city administration, on everything that the city is involved with, and a complete budget review top to bottom, and figure out where we can save. And programs like Save, I believe it's set up to cut operational costs every year, and a program like that is really great. And I think we can push more programs like it and implement a new program to just figure out, in these tough times, these challenges, where can we save money.
Do you think that there's anything that you can do across the board on the issue of wages? It's the biggest ticket item for the city,
Hmm.
and there are kind of built-in accelerator clauses in various union contracts. How would you approach that issue? There's also obviously benefits. There's pension issues. Are you prepared to offer any suggestions about how to tackle that?
Yeah, I would love to sit down with unions and potentially maybe renegotiate a deal, or figure out it with reasonable um, reasoning as to where we can renegotiate these contracts, or if there's any room to renegotiate these contracts, and figure out how we can save Calgarians their tax dollars, or at least save money for the city.
All right, let's talk about the other side of it. One
Yeah.
councillor in particular did take the position that the city council has to be prepared to take the first cut, proposing wage cuts, as well as addressing the transition allowance, the issue of the pensions. What's your take on that? Do you think council members are compensated fairly, or do you think that they should see a cut first?
I so I think Nenshi introduced, Mayor Nenshi introduced a report saying that everyone is compensated fairly, or equally as to private sector. I would say counselors themselves, I'd say it's fair what they're being paid. The double pension, like our family business, I don't have a pension, and that's something that I'm used to. I'm used to also being paid a lot less. So if push comes to shove and we all have to be in this together, right? Like it's not just one person. This is a team. This is a collaborative effort, and if we all feel that this is something that needs to be done for the sake of Calgarians, and then this is something I'm definitely on board with.
So tell us a little bit more about the family business, what you do there, and how your experience at that business would make you a good city council member.
that is that is a loaded question. I feel I do a lot of things, and a lot of my experience and qualities would definitely carry over to city council. Some of the things that I would say, I deal in customer service. I think counselors have sometimes a tough time dealing with angry and upset constituents,
Hmm.
which is normal. And handling and conflict resolution is something that I'm trained to do. So that's something that I would carry over. Another thing would be just the collaborative aspect of working in a very close knit, family like environment. That's similar to, I guess, a counselor's office where everyone's family, everyone is treated like family, and we work together for a common goal, a common good, and try to make this business a better place in terms of I guess in city council, it would be, yeah, making Calgary or Ward 12 a better place for the residents that live in here.
You mentioned accountability and transparency. What particularly do you think needs to change?
Uh, in camera meetings, there's a lot of in camera meetings that I've been hearing at the doors too. That why the secrecy? What is so secret? And the flip side of that, I understand. You know, certain procurement processes and certain sensitive things can't be publicly disclosed. That's understandable, but the other side of it is a lot of folks don't understand why is there so many of these in camera meetings. Another thing too is I think what I would like to propose is kind of like a visitor log with our city councilors, and figuring out who who's meeting with our city councilors, what are they doing kind of day to day, and being more transparent with our constituents.
Okay, let's talk about the relationship between council and administration, because I think that's one of the frustrations is it seems like there's a lot that is driven by administration and then it's kind of sprung on the public and expected to be rubber stamped. And the example I'm thinking of is the guidebook
Oh yes.
to yes, exactly, to great communities. So I'm first let's deal with this in two parts. So first part is, do you think there needs to be a different relationship between council and administration, or do you like the way they're operating?
The relationship can be improved. That's my thoughts on it. I think the way I see it is that city council is kind of like your board of directors, and then you have administration that should be working for that board of directors, except it's kind of the other way around right now, and it feels like it's very top down, I guess you could say, where administration is sort of pushing these things out, and I'm not sure why that is or how that relationship came to be, but I'd like to see that be improved.
Okay, let's talk about the guidebook in particular. What are you hearing about it?
So, uh, everything that's in the media, yeah, I want to say that maybe the rhetoric right there is a little twisted. The maybe not everything how it's out there right now is necessarily true.
Well, let's talk.
Um,
What do you think a misconception is?
so the misconception is that I live in, let's say, oh, is it like the inner city communities? The misconception is that if you were to tear down your house, or they're wanting to tear down all these single family homes and build multi-family large complexes, row housing, apartments and skyscrapers, and that's what I think is what's causing concern, and having residents voice their concerns, as we saw there in the city council meeting. I think it was like under 160 residents came out to voice their concerns about that, and um, what I find about this guidebook is that, uh, according to Councillor Kara, he's stated that close to 10,000 stakeholders were consulted on this guidebook, and when I asked the question, where, why, or who was consulted, where's the evidence to prove that it was even consulted? No one seems to know anything, and no one's putting up their hand and say, oh, I was one of the residents that was consulted on this, and we actually did put in a lot of work. So I'm not sure where the accountability and transparency is there.
So you talked about inner
Yeah.
city communities, but your communities are a little bit further out in the suburbs. Can you see
Yes.
some areas where you could densify and have multifamily housing?
So it's already happening out here in the newer developments, especially in Seaton. You can see things like single family homes with the option to build a legal suite. There's a lot of duplexes that are being built down the street down from me. And then there's proposed land use for multifamily um, units that will be going in as well. And then they're building also row homes as well here too. So I think the densification is happening for sure.
Let's talk then about the balance, because I think there's been this tension for a number of years about whether you put the priority on densifying and building up, or whether you do greenfield development and build out. And both of them have affordability aspects to them. If you can build some more multifamily where you've got existing infrastructure that can make those homes more affordable, but also often first-time home buyers want to have that single family home, and the best way to do that affordably is out in the suburbs. So how would you balance that?
So working with developers, I think we have to find a way to balance the market needs with what we can provide them. I'm not an economics expert, but this is where I would rely on someone that has some expertise in economics to be able to, dictate and say, how can we find that fine balance? And working with developers, I think developers do want that densification from an investor point of view. I think having more doors in one area definitely, you get your best bang for your buck. But then I understand the other side where, first-time home buyers or families may want to move away from that cramped little small apartment with 2 bedrooms to a single family home. And I think right now we're doing a pretty good job of trying to find that balance, and also understanding that we can't have this sprawl that's happening in Calgary.
Okay, let me ask you a little bit more before I move on to some of the issues around the capital side of the budget. Let me just ask you a couple more questions about taxes, because one of the issues that has been raised in the past is whether Calgary needs new revenue and new taxation power. It was raised in a city charter discussion. It was raised in a paper that came out last year. It was raised years ago by the municipal associations. What's your view on that? Do you think there needs to be new tax mechanisms?
No, my first thought on that is no. I think Calgarians and Albertans in general, I think we are happy the way that things are, and if they were to introduce something like a PST or a municipal service tax or something, I think people would actually be upset. I think there's ways to improve our tax system. I recently took a university course here with Paul Ferry. I don't know if you guys you're familiar with him, but he outlined a few things in our tax system that, not necessarily I want to say that it's broken, it can be improved. And I think our tax system can be, in working with the provincial government, I think we can probably find a fair way and a reasonable way for municipalities to keep more of their revenue, and give residents, Calgarians, the best value for their tax dollars.
Okay, let me ask you then about the capital side of the budget, because we've talked quite a bit about the operations. Sure. So on the capital side of the budget, we've already discussed the Green Line. Let me tell you about the other 4 major capital projects, and I want to get your opinion on them. The Event Center in conjunction with the Calgary Flames, the BMO Center expansion, for convention space, the Arts Commons transformation, and the
Hmm.
Foothills Fieldhouse. Now, when the city voted to approve these projects, they did so against the city's own CFO. But the CFO said that the city could afford only one of them. So tell
Right.
me, if you had been on council, would you have made the same decision they did?
I would have probably opposed quite a few of those projects. It's something that we probably can't afford at this time, and back then too. And in speaking with a lot of the constituents here in Ward 12, this is probably the spending issue that they are extremely upset about. I've had a few in the survey also say that why are we spending so much money on these mega projects that I will probably never use or be a part of. And to some degree, these residents are fair in saying that. Um, are these facilities that are needed? You look at other cities that have field houses. It's it's a if I was to run this like a household, and for a city, let's focus on our core services and figure out what a city should be focused on, and what we should be running. These are just to me like a nice to have. If we have excessive revenue, if we have lots of money in the bank, great. Like why not invest in these big capital heavy projects and build the city out? But I think we have other real problems that we need to address first before we can move on to these nice to haves.
If you had to choose one of them, is there any one of them that stands out as a good project to go ahead with right now?
I probably would do the BMO expansion actually.
Why?
It's it's part of the Calgary Stampede that we have every year. I think it would add a lot of value to the Stampede, and it based on hope. Well, I don't know if that's how it always looked, but I love the architectural look of it as well. Just
Okay.
like the central library there, it's beautiful.
Can I just ask you, you gave the impression that there are other infrastructure, community infrastructure priorities that might be of higher concern for your residents. Can you just give us a sense, since we do have a lot of new communities that have been built in your area? Are there some key things that are missing?
Yeah, so my neighbor actually, he mentioned field houses, and there's a small community of lacrosse and hockey players that feel like they can't just go anywhere to play hockey or lacrosse,
Mm,
and that seems to be something that's missing in this area is a field house. Although we do have the YMCA, except you would need a membership to play there, and
mhm.
that's probably one of the downsides and the comment for what he made. And um, in terms of other recreational or any other of these facilities, yeah, I can't think of anything else, but that field house would have probably add value too. And
Okay.
I believe there is land set aside just outside of or near the Ralph Klein Park in Ward 12 for a future field house.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the economy and revitalizing it. I mean, you talked about how your family came here as
Hmm.
with entrepreneurship in mind and the ability to start a business. What do you think needs to be done to turn things around for Calgary?
Economy is a big one, and this is not going to happen overnight. I don't think we can cut our way out of this in terms of cutting back things, and we can't spend our way out of this. This is going to take a lot of time, a lot of creative ways to bring back and revitalize our economy. Having been in the tech space, I started a software company,
Hmm,
which was part of Startup Calgary's accelerator. We made it to I think it was like the second we were semifinalists, and then I went on to participating in the accelerator. And um, telling that backstory because it opened my mind and eyes to a whole different world that I never realized that existed until I went there. And you look at cities in the Bay Area, you look at cities, I want to say like Austin, Texas, and Denver, Colorado, who I would say that they're not much different than us that relied heavily on the oil and gas industry, who has been able to diversify their industries to more tech now and attract tech companies. And I think that's where another one of my strengths is being able to work with um, accelerators, industry experts that are in this space, in this field. Terry Rock is a name that you may have heard of out of Platform Calgary, which I think is absorbing Startup Calgary now. And I think they're doing a wonderful job in attracting investors, angel investors and venture capitalists to Calgary, and being able to invest money into small or tech startups or any tech based companies that are in Calgary. I think we have a lot of great talent here from the oil and gas sector. I have a lot of friends that work for some of the big oil and gas companies that are actually taking an proactive approach in retraining and training some of their employees to learning how to code in like Python's C sharp, and that is the future. And that's where my passion is too, because I love technology and I love how I think the world is moving into this tech space, and I would love to see Calgary be part of that.
So talk to me about how you think that sector might address the problem with vacancy in downtown Calgary. Do you think that's the whole answer? Or one of the recent stats I heard was that there's enough room because of vacancy to accommodate 100 to 140,000 employees. It's a huge number. Do you have any specific ideas about what to do to attract more people to downtown?
I would say that idea is part of the puzzle. I believe there's probably other puzzle pieces in attracting more jobs back to the downtown core. And it is definitely going to be a challenge for city council and um, the in the future, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is that it is going to be a challenge to attract it. I think that little piece of the puzzle, uh, there's things that I've heard that you could change to make it even better, using that vacancy in terms of creating affordable housing, or creating kind of shared office spaces as well to make it affordable for startup companies or existing companies, like subleasing out certain parts of that space to bring back, yeah, all that jobs and, yeah, vacancies.
Let me ask you about one of the strategies that
Sure.
Calgary Economic Development has used. They were given $100 million fund to try to give direct subsidies to
Hmm.
companies. Do you support that approach?
That's a tough one, Danielle. So that I think it's the Investment Opportunity Fund. Is that correct? That you're asking? Yep. So that fund, my team and I actually crunched the numbers, and there's $100 million that was invested in 15 companies, if I recall. Now, I don't think the approach. I don't think those 15 companies should have gotten that much money. I think it's a great idea what they're doing, but that is a lot of money to invest into 15 companies.
Mm.
And I'll tell you why. So there's a accelerator down in the States, in the Bay Area, called the Y Combinator. Every year they accept thousands of applications all across the country for tech startups, and they, out of those thousands, they will greenlight and invest $125,000 US into each company for a 10%
Mm.
stake. And their philosophy is that one of these, I think that every year they take in about 200 to 300 companies that they invest in. So one of these companies will be at least $1 billion company or $100 million company, these unicorns as they call it in this kind of space. And so far they've been very successful in
Mm.
investing in all these companies. Their portfolio that they've invested in since they've started in 2005 is $80 billion,
Holy cow.
and all they invested was, let's see, 100, I believe it was like in the millions, not even like what we're talking about right now with that $100 million
Huh.
fund. Like you could take that $100 million, do what they're kind of doing with this, the concept that they're doing, and turn it into $80 billion. And now the valuation of their entire portfolio of all these companies is over like 800 billion.
Amazing. Well, that's a great example. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
So what I'm hearing you say is, yes, if it's done right, it does make sense, but they haven't done
correct.
it in the right way. Got it. All right. Let me just go through a couple of other issues here to see if you're hearing from constituents that they're a big problem in your community. December, the big snowfall and snow removal. I know that it created big problems in cul-de-sacs, but give me some sense of what you were hearing from the residents of Ward 12.
Yes, yeah, constituents were very upset about this. In fact, one constituent in Cranston, he actually got so fed up because he lives in a cul-de-sac and decided to take his skid steer and push all the snow out of the way, but ended up creating this giant mountain of snow in the middle that some residents had to call 311 on, and yeah, that was a big mess. Yeah, residents were very upset. They felt like a common comment that I got at the doors were, "Why am I paying all these taxes if
Hmm.
they can't even come and clear this all within a reasonable time?" And this reasonable time, I think residents don't expect it to be cleared right away, meaning within 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours, but I was getting this weeks
Hmm.
after the snowfall, and I was wearing my boots and walking around, and I can tell that some residents were very quite upset with
Do you do
that.
you have some suggestion about how they could fix that?
Um, yes, I've actually thought of potentially maybe thinking of a pilot project with the private sector and figuring out, if our snow clearing dollars are best used using city resources, or maybe we can try to figure out if private sector can get to those faster. I'm not sure what the reasoning was or why the delay in snow removal, uh, but I would probably explore other alternatives and figure out who can do a better job, or at least figure out with the roads department and figure out why were the constituents so upset? What can
Mhm.
we have done differently? How can we improve that process and do it in a way that won't create this bureaucracy nightmare?
All right. So you mentioned potential for contracting out or a partnership with private sector for snow removal. It's
Yeah.
been proposed as well for golf courses, having the private sector run golf courses or have the private sector deliver a portion of the a waste pickup. Do you have any other thoughts on how the private sector might be used, or are you generally in support of that kind of approach?
I'm in support of these pilot projects and gathering data and figuring out if the data makes sense to
Mhm.
run it in private sector. The city needs to focus on its core services, and I think garbage pickup is one of them. Transit's one of them. Fire, police, is vital. We shouldn't be outsourcing those aspects of it. But otherwise, yeah, I think I'm for partnerships. I'm for working collaboratively with private sector and figuring out what can they do better and allow the city to focus on what the city is good at.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about police and fire and EMS. So first of all, there was a defund police movement last year
Hmm.
with the notion behind it being to take a portion of the police budget and allocate it to other agencies to have a different response, for instance, for mental health or for addictions. Do you support that move?
That was the decision that the police had made. I do support it, and I'll tell you why. I have a lot of friends that are actually police officers, and there are a lot of police officers in this area as well. And majority of them say that, yeah, sometimes these responses don't require police assistance, and it would be a waste of their time and resources when they can be answering and responding to higher priority calls. The rhetoric around the defund the police is false. I think people need to read past the headlines and figure out what was reasoning behind this $20 million funding that the police was able to come up with and to put it into another program. So yeah, I think a lot of folks just need to read past those headlines.
All right, let's talk a little bit about fire. You said you've got some friends in the police department. Are you hearing any issues in the fire department? It's also another big ticket item. Any efficiencies that
Yes.
could be found there?
I have friends that are in the fire department. They're actually happy about this 24-hour shift that have been brought in. There are pros and cons to that. Obviously, the majority of that time you would be paying their wages for sleeping essentially. But the firefighters love it because they're able to get more out of their time spent in the fire halls and be more efficient from what I'm hearing. Um, Obviously it costs um a, I'm not sure if there is actually a cost savings involved to it, but I would imagine so if we're able to keep firefighters on a shift for 24 hours and then shift that over to another shift that's coming on as well. But it seems like it's creating more efficiency there.
Okay, let me talk to you about EMS because that was a big battle between a number of
Yep.
municipalities who continue to control their own dispatch, with the province moving towards central dispatch. Do you think that was the right fight for the city to take on?
I would say that I understand the spirit of what the provincial government is trying to do there in terms of cost savings. While is that the right move to do? Um, some could say yes, some could say no. I would be for it if it was more efficient and more effective. The issue that we're having right now is delayed response time. A lot of the paramedics that I've spoken with too that are residents here in Ward 12 are actually upset with
Mm.
that, and they're upset because of that response time. They're upset with the fact that now it's being centralized and the calls are routed in so many different places that they get a call that are out of is either out of their area or they're not responding in time, and these are real life and death situations that I think the province could have maybe thoroughly thought this out a little bit more and figure it out what could be the consequences and run like a pilot project, not do a whole provincial wide kind of implementation.
All right. Let me ask you about some of the referenda decisions that were contemplated. So first, they were contemplating doing a referenda on the issue of reducing speed limits to 40 kilometers per hour in residential zones. They made the decision to reduce them and not put it to the people. On the issue of fluoride, they made the opposite decision, and that's going to a referenda in the fall. Do you think that was the right way of balancing those two issues?
Yes, yeah, I would say that that is the right way. Um, the fluoride is going to cost $30 million over I forget if it was like 10 years. $30 million is a big chunk of money and part of the budget too. Whereas $2 million with the speed limits, I know there was a lot of opposition for it. Personally, I'm for reducing the speed limits. It's just going to make our community safer. I've got grandparents, I've got family that are in that older demographic, and you know they're out walking. I see kids here too in Seaton. It's very dense in this area. Cars are parked all along the streets, and I have seen incidents where kids are darting out in between cars, and sometimes these vehicles are flying down these residential roadways, and you know I worry about what could potentially happen um, if these yeah if these speeders are gonna continue speeding, and maybe lowering the speed limit may or may not help with that, but I'm definitely for a lower speed limit, and I think
Okay.
city council did do the right decision in balancing those two.
Okay, let me ask you about public art. I'm not sure if there are any black eyes in South Calgary. There must be. I mean, I think the Poop Palace and the Blue
Oh,
Ring and the
oh
Beaufort
boy.
Towers are the ones that are the most common when people complain about the public art approach. What would your approach be?
Oh, the public arts project is a sore subject for a lot of people, I think, and for me personally, it is a waste of money. And I'll say that if we did it right, I don't think it's a waste of money. I'm all for arts and making it public, but you have, yeah, the Blue Ring, the Beaufort Towers, which are not really accessible to anybody, and they're an eyesore. For example, the Beaufort Towers, I thought it was leftover construction or something that was still needing to be built upon, and to spend the money that we spend on those projects, I think we could probably better spend it somewhere else. Yeah, that
Okay.
I don't know if I have much more to say than that. I think the money could be better used elsewhere, or have more stakeholders involved to choose our projects that are accessible, that aren't an eyesore, and supporting local artists.
Okay, let me ask you about your role as an elected member. So you get elected as an independent, but you do have to work
Mhm.
collaboratively with your other council members to get things passed. So tell me a bit about how you would balance that role if you were in a position where your constituents wanted you to vote one way, but the city administration was saying that it would be better for the city as a whole to do the opposite. What would you do?
I would vote for what my constituents want.
Why is
Um,
that important to you?
I'm for the people. I've always been a servant, and I've always advocated for the other end, whether in my own personal job and I'm on the phone with a customer and I'm hearing their stories, and um, I definitely, my heart goes out to them and to the residents of Ward 12. I just want to do what's best in their best interests and represent them to the best of my ability. So um, I will do my best to represent them and work with administration or other elected officials to um, advocate for my position and the position of residents of Ward 12.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the conversation today. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much, Danielle.
You got it. That's your candidate for Ward 12, Stephen Phan.